This week on Worldview, the assassinations of Hamas and Hezbollah leaders are the latest sparks in the West Asian or Middle Eastern tinderbox, as Israel stands accused of killing Ismail Haniyeh, the man that they were actually negotiating the ceasefire and hostage release deals with. What are the prospects of peace, and what must India prepare for? Hello and welcome to Worldview at The Hindu with me, Suhasini Haidar. Now, the news could not have been more dramatic this week, just hours after Palestinian leader and Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh had met with the new Iranian president and then attended President Pezeshkian's inauguration. The Iranian Guard, the IRGC, announced that Haniyeh had been killed. While there's still confusion over just how he died, with Iran blaming Israel for a missile strike possibly set off by a drone, while US and Israeli news reports pointed to a delayed bomb smuggled into a guest house months ago and then detonated remotely, the fact is that Haniyeh's assassination, its impact, will be felt across the region. Iran's response came swiftly. Iranian leader Ali Khamenei led prayers for Haniyeh in Tehran, and then the government said it would wreak revenge for the violation of its security that will come soon. On the same day Haniyeh was killed, Israel announced it had assassinated Hezbollah leader Fouad Shukur, this is in Beirut's Dahiyeh suburb, saying it had used a missile strike. Also that it had killed another Hamas leader, Mohammad Deif, in a Gaza bombing. That was earlier this month. Now, the attack on Hezbollah followed the killings of 12 children in Majd al-Shams area in Golan Heights in a rocket attack that Israel had blamed Hezbollah for. Hezbollah has denied that charge. The attack was on a community actually of Druze or Arab Israelis, and Prime Minister Netanyahu actually faced their anchor. They called him a war criminal. But after going to the Golan Heights and meeting with those survivors, this is what he said.
And we will settle the score with anyone else who massacres our children, murders our citizens. Anybody who harms our country will die, will be killed. The citizens of Israel, we are facing some challenging days. Since the strike in Beirut, we've been hearing threats from various directions. We are ready for any scenario, and we will stand together, determined to face any threat. Israel will exert a very heavy price for any aggression against us from any arena.
So clearly a day later in Tehran, when newly elected President Pezeshkian took oath, and many countries had sent envoys to the event. India sent Road Transport and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari, a senior leader. There were leaders of Hamas, Haniyeh is there as well, as Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah, all in the same picture. And that's when the Haniyeh killing happened. It also followed other global developments that you can string a lot of these events together with. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had gone to the US to garner support for his government. He had also spoken with the government there in the US, but also the presidential candidates, and addressed the Congress, while President Biden and President Trump were effusive in their support. Vice President Kamala Harris, now presidential contender, was much more measured. Listen in.
It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination.
Remember, 40,000 have now been killed in the Israeli bombing of Gaza over the past 10 months, including about 15,000 children. 115 Israeli hostages still remain in Hamas custody. Meanwhile, China played peacemaker between the two biggest groups, or the two biggest Palestinian groups, Fatah, that has formed the government in the West Bank, and Hamas, that has controlled Gaza for the past 2 decades. They agreed in Beijing to form a unity government. This was criticized heavily by Israel and is believed to have been a possible trigger for the Haniyeh killing. And then earlier this month, more pressure on Israel as the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, issued an opinion calling Israel's continued occupation of Gaza and the West Bank unlawful and a violation of international law. So while Israel has not taken responsibility for Haniyeh's killing, there are several reasons why most believe it is some kind of an Israeli operation. One, you've seen those open vows for reprisals for October 7th, and in particular, the vow that they will finish off Hamas, that they will kill off the leaders responsible. That is the goal. The second, that Haniyeh was killed in Iran and not in Qatar, where Haniyeh lived, or in Turkey, where he visited frequently. And this is certainly very important because any kind of an attack on those two countries, in Qatar, for example, would have caused a much bigger problem for Israel or anyone else, as both Qatar and Turkey host US bases. Turkey, an ally of NATO as well. The third reason many are pointing to Israel is that Iranian nuclear scientists have been killed in similar attacks in Tehran, very targeted assassinations, and that MO, the modus operandi, appears to be Israeli. Prime Minister Netanyahu has consistently opposed a ceasefire over Gaza despite US pressure to accept one, including very, very recently. And killing off the Hamas chief negotiator will certainly slow down the ceasefire process, the talks process, and take some of that pressure off. This assassination will also put the new Iranian President Pezeshkian in the spot, as he has advocated engagement with the West. It'll also force US leaders to close ranks with Israel if Iran's response sparks a bigger war. Obviously, much depends on what will be the kind of reprisal from Iran that Iran has already vowed and already promised it will do. Will it be a targeted killing by stealth, or will it be escalatory strikes? Will Iran attack alone or along with proxies and allies in the region like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and the Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq? And in all of this, we've seen no statement from India so far. But what are all the considerations for India, and what really should India prepare for now? Certainly, New Delhi was put in an awkward position. First, by the Iranians, who included Hamas and Hezbollah leaders in that photograph where the Indian minister was present. And then it was put in that spot by Israel, or if it was Israel that targeted the Hamas leader in Tehran while he was there. That kind of awkwardness of India being in a tough spot when dealing with these two countries will remain as it continues to engage both Iran and Israel, who are deadly rivals. Secondly, India's newly signed MOU, remember in June this year, for Chabahar port could be in trouble, both from the conflict that could follow as well as from more sanctions if they're put in place against Iran. And remember, on Worldview, we did speak about what is the impact of that MOU likely to be. Third, India's agreement with Israel to send more workers to fill in for construction and caregiver jobs that have been lying vacant since last year, since the October 7th attacks, and Palestinians were virtually thrown out of the country. That is also going to face some challenges. Remember, India has already issued a travel advisory for Lebanon. Air India has already cancelled some of its flights to Israel, and there are likely to be more advisories and cancellations now. The fifth is that connectivity and trade projects like IMEC and I2U2, which involve Israel, would also involve Israel and other West Asian countries like IMEC, which goes through UAE and Saudi Arabia, I2U2, with UAE as well. Those are going to be in trouble for the foreseeable future, certainly not while the Gaza war continues. And earlier, I spoke to Professor Sujata Aishwarya. She's at Jamia Millia's Institute of West Asian Studies, and asked her whether Haniyeh's killing will make this tightrope walk by India even more difficult. Listen in.
It's definitely a major event for India because it has happened very close to India's neighborhood, in India's neighborhood. So it is a significant happening. And as you know, the government of India has not responded to the event till now. Politically, I would say it has become very, very tough to balance, to maintain the balancing act. So India wants to release a statement or say something about it after a real careful evaluation of the context, the current emerging situation, and also a possible state, and how a possible statement might impact ties with Israel, which are critical in military areas, and also Iran, where we have important critical economic stakes involved.
Going forward, do you think India will be able to maintain this tightrope, or is it going to have to choose in some way?
It is a very complicated situation, and India wants to make a statement on it after very careful consideration. And what we are going to see in the next few days, or even by today evening or in the next few days, that India will come out with a very balanced, worded statement, something like peaceful resolution of conflict. Now, I want to point this out to you. Even, in our foreign policy, you will always see the reiteration of what many others and I also call the peace idea, the Nehruvian peace idea, is very much alive in India's foreign policy, which we do not often appreciate, because there is a deep-seated understanding that war is the negation of gain. Once you reach the stage of war, that conflict, then there are things that you cannot control or maneuver. There are so many unknowns.
Professor Sujata Aishwarya is the author of essays on Iran and Israel in Indian perspective, as well as other books on West Asia, and I'd encourage you to try and get a hold of them. So what's Worldview's take? India's road in West Asia or the Middle East will always be complicated by history, by close geography, as well as the 8 million Indians who live and work in the region and who would be impacted. India's interests in the region, including trade, energy, and connectivity, are also too intricate to submit to binaries of good and bad and choosing one side over the other. Those interests are best served by asserting India's position in favor of the rule of law and justice, respect for the multilateral order, rather than for might and power, and not for forsaking old friendships in favor of new ones. Let's get you some new reading recommendations. I've given you so much on Israel, Palestine, but here are some others. This is called Target Tehran, How Israel is Using Sabotage, Cyber Warfare, Assassination, and Secret Diplomacy to Stop a Nuclear Iran and Create a New Middle East. This is obviously sympathetic to Israel. It's by Yona Jeremy Bob and Ilan Eviatar. There's another book which I've spoken about before in the past as well, called Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations by Ronen Bergman. So even when nobody's quite sure about the killing of Haniyeh, the fact is that the needle of suspicion really pointing at Iran and at Israel, and these books will help you look at those. There's Understanding Hamas and Why That Matters by Helena Coburn and Rami Khoury, who are known analysts. Israel's Long War with Hezbollah, Military Innovation and Adaptation Under Fire by Raphael Marcus, but again, very sympathetic to the Israeli side. Hamas Contained by Tariq Bekoni is an interesting book. Another book called Treacherous Alliance, The Secret Dealings of Israel, Iran and the United States by Trita Parsi. I should point out this book was really published in 2008, but it has subsequently seen new editions. And Trita Parsi is an analyst you might like to follow as well. And finally, a book, in case you do like graphic novels and graphic books instead, is something called Footnotes in Gaza by Joe Sacco. It's just out and you might enjoy seeing it. And of course, all those books by Professor Sujata Aishwarya as well. But that's all I have time for here on Worldview this week. From the team, thanks for watching.